Hello and welcome back. Sean here, aka Margarita. Welcome back. It's a beautiful day. It's just after lunch. Just enjoyed lunch outside on the patio. And I'm back working on the 8.2 inch ring gear, 10 bolt GM rear end. Not mine, for somebody else. And I already had video number 1 the other night. Now we're working on assembly. So I pounded in the races for the pinion bearings. I pushed on the new bearing with the 30,000 shim, which was what GM originally installed. And then I had to do a little measuring to get to the point where I'm at right now. You have to determine whether the split on the cap, if that is actually on center or not. And using the depth mic, I determined, measuring both halves, that there's about a 2/1000 difference, with this one being a little bit shallower. So the reading I get, because I have a dimension on the back of the pinion, it's 2.541, and that is from the center line of the axle down to the head of the pinion. So with that in mind, I have about a 2/1000 difference, so I wouldn't be too surprised to find, my reading to be off some. This rig here actually came with another pinion depth setting tool, but I like to use it for this purpose. Bolted on the way it is, this surface is equivalent to the bottom of this surface, which is bolted on my half. So when I measure directly off here, with nothing more accurate than a dial caliper, down to the head of the pinion, that gives me my reading. And believe it or not, it's 2.541, which is amazing. Now, again, I have a couple thousandths difference here, and there's probably some slight error, thousandths or two, in this bracket compared to somehow measuring directly off that. I've used a parallel before between the two and down to the pinion, parallel that I use on the mill. But I also know that when you change the pinion depth shim, you have to move it at least 10/1000ths to really see a difference in the pattern. So if I'm within 1 or 2/1000ths of the target dimension, I'm gonna go ahead and put the pinion bearing yoke and nut on, no crush collar, no seal, and go ahead and put the differential in, get the backlash as close as possible, and go ahead, the backlash is marked right on the ring gear by hand. Whoever did the setup of this ring and pinion gave me the dimensions I needed. And I'll go ahead and run the pattern, and I hope it looks good, and then all I have to do is take it all apart and assemble it for real. So I'll check back in with you when we get to the point of seeing how it looks. So stand by. Well, we're having a pretty rare day. I installed the outer pinion bearing, the original yoke, and I cleaned up the original flat washer and the original pinion nut just for pre-assembly. I'll reuse the factory flat washer because one did not come with the kit. And I'll put the new pinion nut on when we set the pinion up for the final time. But I just wanted to get it in place so I could install the carrier. So I chucked the carrier in the housing. And when I was digging through the parts bags this morning to get out the caps for either side, the caps and the original shims were marked left and right. So just for kicks, and this never works for me, I put in the factory one on the driver's side, and I could start the factory shim on the passenger side, but it was tight, but I could feel the backlash was pretty, you got a feel for it. You've done 4 zillion differentials. I knew I was in the neighborhood. So I got out the K-spreader, which is, I mentioned in the last video, in every video I've ever talked about it. It's just awesome. Made by Creative Metal, made in USA. And there's two sets of pins. I had to take the big pins out and use the small pins. There's a hole on either side in the differential housing. This just sets down into the hole, and then you tighten it. There's lots of adjustments on either side. I knew these are about 9 inches apart, so on the bench, because this thing's heavy and a real finger pincher, I set it up for about 9 inches with this all the way in pretty much, and then you just start spreading it out, and I had to spread it maybe 2.5, 3 turns, which I know to be, you know, a few thousandths anyway, and I was able to finish tapping in the other shim, set up the dial indicator, measure the backlash. It's marked, it has to have 6 thousandths. I'm just about 6 and something, less than 7 thousandths backlash. So I don't believe it. I'm glad I was able to document it. It may never happen again. To be honest, I don't enjoy doing this style differential, so I like differentials with spanner nuts on either side. So, but the fact that I am in on the factory pinion depth shim, by dimension it's correct, and the factory side shims, that's just never happened. I mean, I've done quite a few of these. It's crazy, but I'm having fun. So next, I got to break out the dreaded yellow goop and look at the pattern, and this brings up a question I've posed before. Which is more important, the dimension of height that they gave me that I met, or the pattern itself? Sometimes they don't agree, so I guess that's next. We're going to find out. So let me get out my yellow goo, spread it on there, and I'll be either happy or sad, but hey, it's been a rad day. Things are going my way, so I'll be right back. Well, my rad day continues, and I'm going to just enjoy it. The setup manual comes with lots of goods and bads and rights and wrongs. It explains, you know, the tooth itself on the ring gear, what side is drive, what side is coast. The dry side is convex, the coast side is concave. Whoops. And it gives you lots of examples, and to boil it down, you want your pattern to be centered on the tooth, both side to side and top to bottom. In my performance world, the drive side that you're looking at here is way more important than the coast side. On a street car with mufflers and stuff, maybe the coast side would be equally important, but in this case it's slightly off center, but still well within the confines of the tooth. And using all the clues I've mentioned, again, I'm in within a few thousandths of the correct depth. My pattern's good. I'm going to go ahead and move on to final assembly, which is another job, not much fun. We'll see how it goes, is crushing the crush collar. I much prefer setting my pinion bearing preload with shims. It's a kit you can buy. You have to take the yoke off and on many times until you get it right. But the crush collar, you have to take 300 or 400 foot-pounds to start it crushing, and then once it starts crushing, it goes pretty fast. And if you've done a bunch, you've got a feel for what kind of drag you should have. And an inch-pound torque wrench is the correct way to do it. Without the carrier, is my interpretation. So with just the pinion in there, you put the inch-pound torque wrench on the nut, and you should have 15 to 18 inch-pounds of drag. So you can feel that with your hands. Again, I'll measure it just for kicks probably, but I know what it's supposed to feel like. And it's no fun when you crush the crush collar too much, because then you need another one. There's no going back. So in a performance differential, you don't want a crush collar because you're impacting the pinion. Eventually you're going to crush the collar more, as opposed to where shims aren't going to move. A crush collar will crush some more if you put enough force to it, enough power ahead of it. So if you got a performance differential, you need to shim the pinion bearing preload. This is not a performance differential, so this is a street version. This is never going to be a differential. It's going to take a lot of power, so the crush collar in this application, just fine. So, all right, we're going to move on to that. This is where having the tools comes in handy. I need to spread the case just to get the carrier back out. And to get the pinion off, I use my steering wheel puller and a couple bolts where the U-joint goes to get the yoke back off the pinion. And then we start assembly. So let's do that. But it's a good day. As you can see from the photos, I had to hold the yoke still. This is a tool made just for that. Bolts onto the yoke, lots of different yokes. And it'll accept either a 1/2 inch drive or a 3/4 drive ratchet to hold it, and then you still need to turn it. The problem with turning it is you need a thin wall socket. This is a Mac 1 1/8 6-point, it works good. This is the 3/8 adapter I have in it that I had the inch-pound torque wrench on once I got the nut crushed, but it didn't crush very easily. I wish I had 2 giant 3/4 ratchets, you know, like 6-footers, one to hold and somebody to hold it, and one to crank on manually. That would crush the collar pretty easy. I don't have that. I tried pipes and, you know, long ratchets, 1/2 inch drive with a pipe on the end of it. In the end, I tried my 1/2 inch air impact, wouldn't touch it. My 3/4 air impact wouldn't touch it. Those both remove stuff better than my Milwaukee M18 1/2 inch drive impact. But crushing it, that Milwaukee did it almost too easily. The airs wouldn't touch it. The Milwaukee did. I'm impressed. I ruined my other Milwaukee M18 1/2 inch drive by letting it hammer, trying to get some bolts out. So I didn't want to hammer it too much, but I needed to crush it, so I did. I knew I was going to have to remove the yoke at least once. I didn't trust that I wasn't going to damage the seal or take too much time, because I put the old aviation former gasket, you know, the black stuff, brown stuff, on the outside of the seal, the pinion seal. I put clear sealer on the splines of the yoke. The factory had a similar type of sealer. It was white. I had to scrape it out of there, because you don't want oil coming down the splines and coming out behind the nut. I also put a little clear sealer under the flat washer, Loctite on the pinion nut. This is after I got it crushed and checked the rotational drag. You can feel it. This is 14 inch-pounds. It doesn't take more than a blap on the M18 gun to make it too tight. I was afraid going more. I think it's perfect at 14. So now I just got to flip this down, put the case spreader back on, and drop the differential in and button this thing up. I'll be back. Every time I say I'll be back, hours go by. I made this look really easy in a couple videos. Probably have a couple days total. Cleaning stuff, making tools, doing different things. Oh yeah, this is to put the seal in, because the pinion itself sticks out. You can't just have a regular seal driver, so you need something big and round. So anyway, I'll be back when we're almost done. Success. We're going to call it a night. Sun's going down. I set the cover on with the gasket just to keep the dust out of it. Hand tighten a couple bolts. With this style differential, you have to pull the center pin out of the differential to slide the axles in, to put the C-clips on, push them back out, and put the center pin back in. That's all that holds the axles in. I don't know what his plans are for axles. You can eliminate the C-clips with a C-clip eliminator kit, which makes it like a bolt-in axle. You have to change the axle bearings. And then the end of the housing, the bolts that hold the backing plate on for the brakes, also holds your axles in. Just like a 9-inch Ford, Dana 60, etc. So the C-clip style axle, not the greatest. If you've ever been to the stock car races, you've probably seen a whole axle, wheel, and brake drum come off a car. So drag racing, same thing. Not the hot setup. Anyway, if you ever wondered, this is random knowledge, what the V was for in the 10 and 12 bolt rear ends, my buddy and I used to go searching for cars with 12 bolts in the junkyard. You'd always see the 2 bolts down here, and you knew it was a 12 bolt. You could see it hanging down below the fuel tank. Anyway, this V is to catch oil slinging off the ring gear, send it down the 2 holes that I just used for the case spreader to help lubricate the axle bearings. So it takes oil, it's just spraying around and channels it into the holes and down the tube in theory. They did away with this after the 10 and 12 bolts. You don't see this anymore. I always thought it was a really distinguishing feature, and it really beefed up the cover. So that's your random tidbit of knowledge. I'm going to call, I'm not even going to clean up my mess. The shop looks like a bomb went off. Looks like a job for early morning Sean. But right now, I'm going to take a break. So thanks for watching. On to the next project. Have a nice evening.